part of the philosophy there is, you know what? Have chutzpah. Like, go after things. Go after what you want. Don't be afraid to be assertive. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want and be bold and courageous.
I'm an aggressive person. I'm very passionate. I can get really loud and in your face, and that's just who I am. And it's like, that's that.
Don't be a passive participant of life. Be an active creator.
Here we go. Hey creators, it's your hosts, Natalie and Yasmin, and you're listening to the Course Creation Podcast. We'll talk business, building digital empires, and how to create passive income to start living a life you love. We are here to empower those of you who are thinking of starting your own course and to support those who are already well on their way to success. We've built a 7-figure media agency on unique storytelling, and now we're here to share our story in the course creation world, and more importantly, to hear yours. We are committed to creating a space for learning and a space for diversity and inclusion. Now let's get the show started. 3, 2, 1, action. Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Course Creation Podcast. Today we have a very special guest with us, our lovely friend Katie Zeppieri. I'm so honored and excited to introduce her. She is so inspiring and has accomplished so much. Katie is one of today's leading voices and thought leaders on empowerment through her work as a social entrepreneur, author, TEDx speaker, podcast host, and social influencer. Katie is at a forefront of conversations surrounding leadership, self-development, women, youth, mental health, and business for social good. Katie is the founder and CEO of Girl Talk Speakers Bureau, which represents women who are innovators in their industry. From venture capitalists to broadcast journalists to CEOs, Girl Talk manages an impressive roster of female speakers and connects them with opportunities to speak on stages across the globe. Katie's also the founder and president of MicDrop Marketing, a boutique marketing company that amplifies purpose-driven brands through event management, public relations, influencer marketing, and staffing. Wow, Katie, this only scratches the surface of what you've been up to. It is such a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Wow, that was a mouthful. So good for you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I was honestly, Yasmin, take a breath. That was a lot.
Honestly, I was like feeling the MC in me. I was like, I gotta represent Katie well.
Yes.
She's accomplished so much. And honestly, Katie, you've been such an inspiration. You know, our story actually goes back to university. That's where, we met. We all went to the same university program, and you've accomplished a lot to date. So I'm really excited to hear about your story and how you came to this day and age today.
Yeah, tell us a bit about growing up, like who you were as a child and what inspired you to go on this journey.
Yeah, wow. We're going right there. And you know what? It's a good place to start because I often talk about your 5-year-old self. And I just think there's so much to learn from that 5-year-old self. Your 5-year-old self had some big dreams, most likely, had some big ideas for what their life was going to look like. And what can happen along the way if you're not careful is you can have that dream at 5 years old. And then if you flash forward to say 15, and there's been many, many studies that show this, maybe things that you thought were possible for yourself at 5 you don't think that when you're 15, and suddenly you can start to feel like your life is limited in some way. And I feel like in many ways with responsibilities that come with age and different stages of life, as we get older, we can really feel that narrowing in, like our opportunities to do those things that we wanted are becoming harder and all of that sort of stuff. So I think I was definitely that kid who did, every day I wanted to be something different. And I had like a lot of zest for life. It was like, let's create things, let's build things, whether it was, running plays on my street. I would like rally all the kids and like write a play and make my parents watch it and, have dress up. I was also always trying to like sell things. So, I took my Nona has a farm, had a very big farm. And so I talked to her about getting some of her vegetables and setting up like a little vegetable stand on her street. Even bees. I tried to sell bees for a period of time. So I got my younger brother, to go into the bush with jars and like catch the bees. And then we would attempt to sell these. I tried to run a fair, a little fair in the backyard. So I offered like wagon rides for $2, and I actually got a customer for that. It was like the best day ever. So like these were kind of like the pieces that kept me going as a kid. And I just like, I was busy. I feel for my parents because I look back on the home videos and I was just yelling and like singing, and notice me was kind of like the ongoing sort of theme. And as I got a little bit older and made my way through school and high school, I certainly felt that pressure of those dreams that you have for yourself can become something that you doubt. And it can be both an internal wrestle, and it can also be something that maybe your peers or people outside of your self maybe make comments to you that make you start to doubt and question. And grade 7 to grade 12 was a very difficult period for me socially. I went to very cliquey schools, unfortunately, and I was the new kid in grade 7. I moved to a lot of different schools growing up. There was just like a culture that was built there within the school that I wasn't part of. I've also always been somebody who liked to get involved and liked to achieve, and it that sort of all together with that energy coming into a school that was already like tight knit and closed off and had things a certain way, it didn't go over well. And I really had a struggle trying to find my own place socially. So I definitely experienced like social exclusion, bullying of many different forms. And I think what kept me going throughout, and we can certainly dive more into this, was I really do believe that you have to decide for yourself that you're going to stay true to who you are and to your dreams. And you have to decide that, like, regardless of what anybody else says to you, because at some point or another in our lives, we all have people who are going to maybe try and throw us off our course, challenge us, make us feel like what we believe is not possible. And so the goal is to stay true to yourself, keep going, keep trying, even when things are hard, even when they're challenging, and not being afraid to shine your light into the world. And so a lot of the things that made me like a target for bullying, I was the teacher's pet, right? Like I remember like this moment in grade 11 when it was like our school dance, and I got called up onto the stage, and unknowingly to me, I won the teacher's pet award, and they put like an animal
There
mask.
was an award called the teacher's pet.
Yes.
Oh my God. Like that's already setting kids up for failure.
Yeah, it was definitely student planned, right? So this was kind of like a student sort of thing. And they put like an animal mask over my head. And like I had like spent the whole night like getting ready and like trying to look nice for this dance. And I had like this thing, and it became like a laughing,
That's
moment
horrible.
for everyone. And I could kind of like go back to so many different like moments like that where it was just like you couldn't believe that maybe there was that sort of level of hate, and kids can be mean, and there's all those sorts of things. So my goal was, what way can I like leave a mark in this world? And that has been something that I've asked myself for a long time. I've always felt like an old soul, and through good times and bad times, I constantly go back to, what am I leaving behind when I am not here? And that's not just about business and not just about career milestones. It's also just about who you are as a person, with your family, with your friends, and what you want to be known for. So I know we could go into a lot more depth, but I think to summarize it, that's sort of been a philosophy that came out of my youth and my childhood that has stuck with me to today.
I really love that story. I really want to thank you for sharing that, because I think that, a lot of us can relate to that. Where our 5-year-old self is somebody who wants to try everything and do everything and believes in everything. And then we go through the world and things happen to us, and that belief gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And it can totally relate to, the course creators that are listening to this podcast right now, because a lot of that is about changing our mindset and believing that we're going to put ourselves out there and not be judged, and that can take a lot. So I love that that's your message. I love that that's what you're all about, because it's so important, especially for anyone who's going to be putting themselves out there.
Yes.
So going forward, let's talk a little bit about the next stage of your life, right? So I can understand that was fairly traumatic, but looking at you today, it's like you've absolutely overcome that, and if not, you've used that as a strength. So how did that happen?
You know what? I believe that we are given the obstacles in our life that we're dealt for a reason. And if we choose to lean into them, and try and find some growth and opportunity within the challenge, it actually directs us on the path that we're meant to be on. And that was how I survived high school. I poured myself into my passions. And if I saw a problem, I tried to find a solution. That's always been my philosophy. To me, that's what leadership means. It's being somebody who sees problems and doesn't just think, oh, well, that's somebody else's to worry about. They actually decide, you know what, I'm going to take responsibility and I'm going to try and do something to make it better. And I think the same could be said for entrepreneurship, for course creation, for any of these sorts of things. When you're a creator, when you're a producer, it's you looking for where are the gaps and what can I do to solve them. And so, one of the experiences that I can point to from my high school experience that really pivoted me to where I think I am today was I was involved in the Human Rights Club at my school. I had an amazing principal. I've always had such strong mentors in my life, and I can't stress the importance of that enough. Having people who are at least 10 years or 10 steps, I'd say, ahead of where you are in terms of your life or your career or where you'd like to be is so important, because you can get such valuable insight and advice from their own learnings and apply it to yourself. So while I had a difficult time socially, I had a great relationship with my teachers and coaches and people in my life. And so my principal was a big mentor for me. And we came up together with the idea of me actually going back to my elementary school and teaching kids about bullying and about being a leader. And we actually together created a co-op. So I earned a co-op credit for going back and teaching kids about bullying. And I documented all of the lessons. It was a 10-week program, and we actually had it published by the school board where I'm from, the Durham District School Board. So, at grade 11, I had seen how taking the obstacle, the bullying, the thing that was like affecting my life in a negative way, and actually channeling that into something where, well, what can I do to solve this to help the next generation and help those kids coming up who do feel alone and are experiencing this? And it became something that was so inspiring. And I had a teacher resource manual, like a published manual, at that age. And that just set me up to believe that things were possible. And I could create something. I didn't just have to wait for somebody else to kind of create something for me. So that's entrepreneurship. And I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur really until, shortly after university, where the idea came to create a company. And so that youth empowerment theme has resonated, and that's where I started. So my first company after radio and television arts was Make Your Mark Enterprises. That is still the parent company of everything that I do. And we started with summer camps. We started with girl empowerment programs, and ultimately our Girl Talk Day, which is where I saw the first kind of level of real traction. And we've been building from there.
That's incredible, Katie. And it's so interesting that you say, I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And yet, since you were very, very little, it's so wild because you were an entrepreneur at heart with all the activities that you would take on day to day. So it's incredible. I feel like you've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and you continue to be in an awesome space that you belong to. It's such a gift that you have. So much to unpack. And I think a lot of people, depending on their experiences, the stories that they have about themselves, they still have this barrier that they need to get over. And you were able to take all of your experiences, package it up, and figure out a way to make the world a better place and empower people with all the knowledge and everything that you had and all the things that you had to face growing up. So for someone, for example, who's a course creator and is in their head and looking back at their stories and saying that they're not good enough to either share their story or be out on a platform or be a leader for others, what are some suggestions that you would recommend that someone takes on?
I think there's that voice in all of our heads that's the inner critic, the voice that challenges and potentially tries to show us examples or proof from our past of why, this new endeavor is not a good idea, or why we might fail and what that might mean. But I just truly believe that we as humans need stories, and we need to hear each other's experiences. That has been something that has been essential to the human race for thousands of years, is story sharing, talking about our lives and kind of creating meaning for other people. And so I believe that if you have an idea, you are being called to put it out into the world. It might not always be what you expected. It might not always have immediate impact, but I do believe that even one person kind of hearing your story, hearing your message, where it makes a difference, inspires them, challenges them to think differently, you are doing positive work. So from like a deeper personal level, that's the message that I would say is putting out your ideas into the world. You're never going to know what's possible unless you choose to try. If you don't try, you know the answer. You're never going to have a course, right? You're never going to have a business. You're never going to have that chance at that life or career that you've imagined. But if you do decide to put it out, you're putting yourself out there on the dance floor for opportunity. Opportunity dances with those who are on the dance floor. I totally believe that. So if you're not even putting yourself there into that space, you're basically accepting for yourself that you're not going to live up to your own dreams and potential. You're not going to take the risk. So I always say to try, and you figure it out as you go. And from my own experience, some things that I've tried have worked on the first try. Many things have not. And I learned something from that. And I take the pieces that work and keep going forward and leave the pieces behind that didn't work.
I completely agree. It's so interesting because I think that's one of the struggles of entrepreneurship. It's like try again, and then the people who are outside of that, the people who aren't entrepreneurs, just don't get it. Like I can tell you, I've struggled with like family, parents, sometimes even my spouse. He'll be like, what? You're working on another project? You're doing another new thing? Like, can we just focus, please? And I'm like, you don't get it. Like, I'm going to do 120 things before I like figure it out. So like, this is my journey and I just need to go through it and try. So I love that you mentioned that. I also feel like we need to stop making ourselves wrong when we fail. Like it's kind of like, all right, I've tried it, I failed, it wasn't a success. What did I learn, instead of I'm not good enough to do it again?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
It's treating all of those failures as wins, which we always say they're not really failures. They need to have a different name, because you're constantly getting better, you're progressing, you are making yourself better, you're understanding what those mistakes were and just make things better. So
yeah. So Katie, sorry, go ahead.
It's funny because even that way of thinking about failure and entrepreneurship, depending on where you grow up and not only how you're raised in your family, but how society kind of thinks about failure, really can make such a powerful difference in terms of how you see it. And it's really just a perspective. It's just a perspective shift. Like my boyfriend got back in February, just before quarantine, from Israel and spent a trip there with his MBA program. And he came back just telling me how much inspiration he took from like even the business aspect of how people do things as entrepreneurs in Israel. And I didn't even know. So he's like recommended this book, Startup Nation, which I'm reading right now and listening to. Cool. There's a way of building like a culture around how you see failure and how you see entrepreneurship. So part of the philosophy there is, you know what, have chutzpah, like go after things, go after what you want.
I love you said that.
Don't be afraid to be assertive. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want and be bold and courageous. And like not only is this just an issue in general for people to kind of find that courage, but part of my work is female based and working with female entrepreneurs and girls and all of that. And so there's actually so many studies that show like women are more timid in terms of like being bold and being assertive because you want to be liked and you want to be nice and you want to be all of these things. And it's like, you can be that, you can be kind, and you can be, a decent person and still be bold and speak up for yourself and not be afraid to go after what you want. So I love this chutzpah message. And it's I'm trying to apply even more of that to my own life. And then I also love this idea that for them, they just want to get to failure fast. Like, let's get there and let's figure it out and let's mess up, because the sooner that I mess things up, the sooner I can pick up the pieces that worked and kind of keep going forward. So I just love that. And it's been something that's been making me even think differently about my own journey.
I love it too. You know, I lived in Israel for 6 years.
Oh,
so,
no way.
Yeah, so I'm very, very familiar with that culture. And I loved what you said about, like, you know, just as a woman, go for it. Because I can tell you, like, in our career at NYB Media, and I'm going to share this story. Yasmin knows what I'm about to share. We had somebody that we used to work with, and he used to say to me, "You're too aggressive." And I don't know why every single time he would confront me with that message, I really tried eloquently to like explain that, you know, please don't call women aggressive. You know, this is me expressing myself, and like there's nothing wrong with that. You know, and I still in my head did have to do some analysis about, am I being too aggressive, and am I allowed to be too aggressive? And I love what you said, because as women, we should have every right. It's okay to be kind and eloquent and aggressive and charming and all of those things combined. It doesn't mean anything. So I love that, because I feel like if a man was too aggressive, that's okay. Like, no one says anything about that.
Yeah, and like, you're not meant to be a pushover in life. Like, yeah. You're not. You're meant to, don't be a passive participant of life. Be an active creator. Actually take charge of like forming things. And you don't get oftentimes if you don't ask. And if you're not courageous enough to kind of like put your voice forward, or if you feel like wrong is being done to you, like, you know, you can approach all of these things with kindness, but you're not called to be a doormat. You're called to be somebody who speaks up and who puts like words of truth and life out into the world. And that's the only way. That's part of being your authentic self moving forward.
Love it. I love all of it, because I think honestly, that's me. Like, I don't want to subdue myself. Like, I'm an aggressive person. I'm very passionate. I can get really loud and in your face, and that's just who I am. And it's like, that's that. So I love everything you're saying. So taking it back to course creators, you know, Katie, you've achieved a lot of success. You're like a mega influencer in my mind. And also you have very successful businesses. You know, part of course creation, part of, you know, selling any programs online is you want to build a community. But not only build a community, because anyone can like even go out there and buy likes, but, you know, build a community of people that trust you, that you inspire, that love the message that you're putting out there. You know, for somebody who's just starting out and has like literally nothing, what are some of the things that they can do, and how did you go about building your community?
Ooh, community is so important. Your network is so important. And I'm passionate about talking about this because I have long complained about networking events. I really have always like not loved, like, whenever somebody's like, Katie, like, you want to come to this networking event? I'm like, ugh, like, you know, it just feels in my mind so like forced, and it doesn't always have to be. And there's many events that are not like this, but what I don't like about that sort of mindset and concept of how networking has previously been thought of is that it's very much like what can I get from someone here? So like, I've been at events where it's like people are literally just coming up and getting business cards from anyone who like is wearing a suit or looks important, you know, or just shoving their business card in your hand, like trying to see. That is not how authentic relationships work. So when we're talking about networking, when we're talking about building a community, it's all about value, and it's all about a give and take relationship, just like a marriage, just like a really good friendship. You know, if one person is doing like all of the taking and no giving, it's not going to work. Any relationship in life has to be like mutually beneficial. There has to be something that both parties are getting from the equation. And so I think what is important is for you as an individual to always ask yourself, what value do I have to offer to this person, to this circle, to this industry? Like, what is it that I offer? And even when you're starting out, even when you're just say a student and you're looking to kind of make those first steps into a new space, you still can find valuable things to offer. Let me give you an example. One thing when you maybe ask someone to meet for coffee or to have a phone call and you want to pick their brain for advice, that is awesome that that person has agreed to take up that time and spend that time with you. Have questions prepared in advance. Take the time to actually engage with someone. So you've taken the effort of in advance, like you've researched, you've learned about this person. You're asking very thoughtful questions that like make sense, show that you care, and not just like someone said yes, but I just rolled out of bed and decided to, have this chat. Ask the right questions, do the right follow-ups. Once somebody says and recommends to you like a book or you should read this article, like that's on you to actually go away, read the article, read the book, and that's a great follow-up piece to then continue the relationship and come back to them. So there's like this value add. It's constantly seeing what do you have to add value. And if you do that, if you sincerely go through every interaction in your life and ask yourself, not only what can I get from this person, how might they be able to help me, but how can I help this person? You will never go wrong. And you will build a community that is truly built on like this trust factor, and show that you are always looking to better other people as you are working to better yourself. And to me, that's where the best relationships come from.
Oh man, I love that so much. It resonates so much with me. I feel like we've gone to so many networking events in our lives, and it's a love-hate relationship just for the exact same reasons that you mentioned, but it's about what you take into those networking opportunities. It's always about, and I always say this, part of what I love doing or why I love doing what I love doing is also creating opportunities for others, because I think that just gives me drive to wake up every day. Like, how am I supporting the communities that I'm touching? So that's always been a huge point. And it's so interesting because you did a talk some time ago about connecting like you mean it. I think that's what it was called. And there was a quote that you mentioned. It was, connection is the energy that is created between people, what they feel, seen, heard, and valued. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. Katie, you've launched several programs. And although a lot of them were like events that you held in person, there is a lot of behind the scenes that happens, obviously, leading up to these events, and it has a lot to do with community. So how did you raise awareness on your initiatives on a digital platform before you showed up in person at your events?
Yeah, it's so true. And I think, social media can feel like a very overwhelming place to start. There's all these algorithms that you're trying to navigate. And you know what, when I was starting out, I thought I had to like sign up for all these different things. And that was the way to, succeed. Was I saw people doing like these circles where people would just like and comment everyone's photos, or, there was like Instagram hacks, and there was like all these ways to try and like build a community and build followers. And when I started out, that's what I thought I had to do. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to try all these things. And you realize that it's all just fluff. Like, really, it's much better to have 100 followers who care about what you have to say and are interested and engaged with your content than it is to try and just fill it up with like nonsense people who aren't even going to, watch your videos or aren't even going to read your content that you're putting out. So quality over quantity is the first point and the first place to start. I also think it's about finding ways to tell your story. And this is where, for people who maybe don't have like a media background or something like that, you might be unfamiliar with how do I kind of tell my story. But I would encourage you to sort of look at who you are and look at what some of the pillars are. I like to call them that. Like, what are some of the pillars of your personality? And how does that tie to your profession or what it is you're trying to be an expert, position as an expert for, the course you're trying to build? What are the things that I represent that I can speak to, that I can talk about? And once you kind of have those, say like 3 to 5 pillars, it's about creating content, whether it's through photos or blog posts or videos, that help you express and show and demonstrate credibility in those areas. So it gives you an opportunity to tell like a little bit of story of your past, maybe some of your past successes, maybe to talk about a failure where you struggled, offering a little tidbit of wisdom or something you've learned, a nugget of wisdom. So you're starting to create this sort of narrative, and it's all about consistency. Like, people don't just immediately trust you or don't immediately know you on the first post, right? You have to be building this over time. So I think that's really important. I also found that what worked really well for me was making meaningful connections with media outlets. And one of the best ways to kind of build a brand for yourself and for your company is to, create a good backlog of PR. And so that's another way, if you're looking to become like an industry expert and an industry provider, like, you have value to offer. There are certain news outlets or papers or blogs that might want to hear from you in terms of what you have to share about your given topic. So it's looking for ways that you can even pitch yourself. I found that to be very successful. And again, I now receive lots of pitches, and there's good pitches and there's really bad pitches, right? So to go back to the value piece, you have to center the entire ask or the entire pitch on value. I see your blog here. This is what it looks like you're representing and talking about. I really enjoyed this. I am an expert in X, and I feel that, my passion for this, some of the knowledge might be of interest to your readers, to your viewers, and this is why. Here's some suggested things that I could talk about, that we could write an article on. Like, you're offering immediate value in that interaction, and you're positioning yourself as that expert who wants to bring something to help them. It's not like these people are like, hey, I just want to give out opportunities. It's like, no, what are you giving to them? And from there, if you're sending out enough like thoughtful pitches kind of directed at your target audience and directed at your target people, I promise you would likely hear back from one of them. And like, those opportunities to share content, we're in a content creation space. People need content. So they're looking for those experts and those individuals to come forward. I really have found that media has been an ultra great way of, so I'm building the community, I'm trying to do all the things, but then media and features and interviews have been a great way to kind of like elevate those messages to a bigger audience.
Yeah, I feel like if I was going to take that and relate it to the digital world, I would say there are even avenues to explore between other course creators or other experts in your industry. Perhaps like exchange content from each other, like I'll do a post about you, you do a post about me. I feel like now we're starting to shift our mind around what media is, because social media is getting so big that a lot of the times when we talk about media, it really could be on the social media landscape as well.
Yes, absolutely.
I love what you were saying about storytelling in when you are pitching, because as we've been creating our own course with Video Editing 101, a part of that has been putting ourselves out there on camera and talking about our experience, our story, where we came from, and sort of trying to create that trust factor with our audience. And I know for myself, I've personally struggled with, like, again, talking about my story. I'm like, oh my God, I've heard it for 10 years. I'm so over it. Like, I just want to move on. But I really want to talk about that trust factor and putting yourself out there on camera, because even with networking, like when we are in a room with a person, like smelling them, hearing them, like the way that they speak, the nuances, it's like, all those things play into trusting somebody. And then now, in the world where a lot of it is digital, a lot of it is online, a lot of it is social media, and like we're in the middle of a pandemic where everybody's at home, how do you create the same networking experience but online?
Yeah, I think video and screens add a challenge. They add something different than maybe what we're used to and what we're hardwired to sort of look for when we're interacting. But I do think a lot of your personality can shine through. And it's just about kind of getting more and more comfortable in front of camera. It's the same way when anybody asks me about, like, how do I get better at public speaking? It's like, literally, you just have to keep doing it and push yourself to do the talks, and even when you're nervous and even when it's uncomfortable. And each time you're building some wisdom for yourself. You're learning like what worked really well, what stories were the audience really engaged with, and it's the same thing for anything to do with digital media and connections and videos and putting yourself out there. It's going to feel really awkward at the beginning. You're going to be like, okay, like this feels funny. And then you start to get a little bit better. Like, you know, even right now, how I'm talking with you, instead of at the beginning where it might be like, oh my gosh, I have to look at the camera like constantly as I'm talking, it actually feels a lot more natural if you like you look away. And it's just like you're having a conversation with a friend. You're looking at the camera, you're looking away, you're not afraid to like joke around a little bit or crack a joke. So the more that you're doing it, you will learn and see what feels right and what feels natural. I also think that what happens from that is you start to see what messages are resonating with people. Mm-hmm. You know, what are the things that I'm talking about that stuck? Oh, wow, I got a comment on today's video. You know, what was the comment directed for? What did they take away? What did they like from this? Each one of these pieces like helps you further find your voice and find your own unique angle.
Yeah, 100%. That's so great. I feel like that's something that I'm really taking on for myself, because for 10 years, I feel like I've been behind the scenes all the time, producing, guiding our clients, like telling them what they need to do. But then I need to practice that myself. So the most important thing and takeaways is be confident, practice makes perfect, and just keep on doing it. And I think another note is, you know, we always talk about it, Natalie and I, where I'm like, okay, you know, I'm practicing. And she's like, yeah, do it like in the shower. Like, we'll do it in the shower. That sounded dirty. But basically, you know,
but in all seriousness, growing
in the
up,
shower, yeah.
I used to practice accepting Grammys in the shower. Like, it's just like, not that I wanted to be an actress or anything, but it's just like, sometimes it's like, getting used to the sound of your own voice when you're talking, you know, and just like feeling comfortable doing that. And like when you're in the shower pretending to be like a Grammy award winning actress, all the shit that comes out of your mouth, like you would not imagine. So
it's true. And that's the other thing, not being in your head and actually speaking out loud. I think that's like number one step. Like you said, getting comfortable with your own voice, because there's been so many times where I've had a script and I'm like, I've memorized it in my head, but have I said it out loud? And then as soon as I open my mouth to say it out loud in practice, I'm like, oh my God, I completely forgot what I was going to say. But it's, you know, it's nice to, for example, if you have a partner, if you have a sibling, if you have a great friend or a mentor or whoever that is in your life, and if you have a script or if you have a story that you want to share it out loud with somebody who you trust and who you feel comfortable with, because as soon as you get more comfortable with that, then you can open up the doors to a big platform, speak in front of hundreds of people on a stage, or in a digital platform where talking to thousands of people, if not millions at once. So and really great takeaways.
I think to that point, you know, just like a public speaking kind of tip that I find has worked really well for me, I personally do not come across as natural when I am too scripted. It's not something that I love, which would make me a terrible actress. But thankfully for like public speaking or just kind of like being like an expert, which many people are seeking to be when they're creating a course, you know what you're talking about, you know, like, you know what it is that you're the expert on. So it's just about kind of getting more comfortable with the ordering. So one of the things that I really recommend is instead of like I have to say this sentence, then this sentence type of script, is actually just more of like a bullet point model. That's what I would find would work the best for me. I would sort of have like, what's my introduction topic? What am I going to say? And then I think inserting in your bullet points is like a story. Stories are so great, like a personal experience that you're going to share, which teaches a lesson. That's a really great way of doing it too, because usually when you do that, the story piece where you're talking about, oh, like this time this happened to me, you don't need to script that because you know it. It's just like you were talking to a friend or somebody like that. You can talk about your story, and then just in your head remembering, or in your notes remembering, that story ties to this message. That's what I need to get across. And so typically if I was prepping for something where it was going to be like I had to be in a certain time frame and had to be all this sort of stuff, I would kind of outline some bullet points of what are the key messages and attach a story to each one of those messages so that it gives you that natural flexibility to talk about yourself in a way that feels real, but still get across the flow of what you're trying to communicate.
That is so important. I really actually want to emphasize what you just said, which is like attaching a story to specific distinctions or lessons. Like, we learn so much better through stories than anything. Like, I like to compare this to like TED Talks. Like, why is it possible to sit through like a 40-minute TED Talk and be like totally into it, but you can't sit through a 20-minute YouTube video of somebody ranting on? And the reason for that is because those TED Talks are so like crafted with storytelling, and it's so much easier to even like get to the point and learn if you attach a story to everything. So I really love that you mentioned that. Thank you so much for doing that. Let's get a little bit more technical now. So you have built almost like an empire, a digital empire in a way. What are some of the automation tools that you like to use? Like, is there like an email marketing provider that you like to use? For social media, what do you use? How do you handle all of that? Because sometimes the tech can be really overwhelming.
It absolutely can be. And to be completely honest, automation is something I need to get better at. I am someone who's doing a lot of the stuff real time. And I think part of that is we've gone through a little bit of a brand shift over the past few months. And so, what worked previously is kind of different than where we are now. And we're also doing like a daily live show. So it's kind of like all sort of seat of your pants type of content and things, but it is planned and sort of thought through in advance as well. So yeah, we use MailChimp, very simple. I've used It's like a really great sort of social media content platform that allows you to see your Instagram feed and plan out how the squares look next to each other in advance. And I think that like having those sorts of models so you can kind of see how things flow together is so important in terms of aesthetic. But I will say that when I started out, I think I spent too much time on aesthetic and not enough time, which I've kind of like recently tapped into a lot more in terms of making sure that the content hits the pillars that I was talking about. It's so much more important that your content hits the pillars and furthers your brand message and expert credibility than just having like a pretty filler photo. Like I remember there was a time where I was doing pretty filler photos, and it's like, that's not serving anyone. It's not what's actually going to create like a meaningful connection. It's not what's going to drive forward your brand. So I think it's that balance. I also really stress the importance of speaking to the time, because say even right now where we are in the middle of a global pandemic, arguably one of the biggest like civil rights movements of our time as well, content that was pre-planned like a month ago wouldn't necessarily make sense to where we are right now. So I think looking for ways that you can also speak to the moment and speak to what some of the concerns and fears and worries and struggles of what people are experiencing in the present is so important. So I know I'm not giving you the best answer on automation, and I think that's mainly because I need to do better at automating and finding out what works well for me. And I like I like the fact that I could kind of comment on right now. So I think it'll be a challenge for me to kind of find that balance of how I do both, and you absolutely can. But those are just some general tips in terms of kind of like building out your social feeds and platform.
You're mastering that, and that's part of your success in your community building too, because you are the voice, behind everything that you put out there. And that's really awesome when it comes to nurturing your community too. So
you also said some really like amazing tips, even just outside of automation, like hitting the pillars of your content. I love that. I feel like it really gives people the freedom to like just focus on your message. You're right. Like, it's not about that filler image to just throw on there so your Instagram looks good. It's like really just focus on your message and create content that like give the people who are in your community that are following you content that really speaks to them, instead of just like trying to make it look good. And I know that's such a big deal for a lot of females, especially. Like, we can be perfectionists at times, so it's kind of like going out, and there's a huge like course creator in this industry called Grace Lever that I follow, and she has this statement where she says, take imperfect action. And I love that because I know for us it's such a struggle. We're like, we are content creators, so at the end of the day I'm like, it has to look perfect, it has to be branded, and it has to sound perfect, and it has to have a bow on top, and it's like I don't feel good unless it's perfect. But if I don't take the imperfect action, it's just not going to happen. So have to take the action. Now, a lot of amazing things about what you just said, but I want to take a minute. Let's talk about the current movement and what's been happening over the last couple of weeks. I really want to get your perspective on everything. So if you don't mind sharing with us, how have the last couple of weeks been for you and your brand and your business and your life and just everything?
Yeah. Wow. I think I have not witnessed before a time like we are in right now. And this was, there were already energies and things changing because of COVID-19. And I saw, people who were neighbors who I wouldn't see outside nearly as much. They're out and they're walking and they're gardening and there's kids playing outside. And you know, we're distant, but I've been seeing people like reach out, and in many ways, like there's certain conversations with family members I'm seeing people having like more frequently than they were, when you could be there in person. There's just been such a shift in the air. So like there was challenges and there was chaos and all of that, but there's also been like this real beauty, this coming together in terms of our humanity. I think even just in terms of the environment and seeing how like us like not commuting all for a while like has had such a positive effect, and people like spending more time getting fresh air and being more conscious about their actions. There's been some really powerful shifts happening. Then on top of that, in the middle of all of these things, we see the video go live of the public killing of George Floyd. And that video is so disturbing and just hit so hard across the globe. And it's not that there haven't been, unfortunately, cases before that should have woken everybody up to that level, and talking about the racial pandemic that's been happening. But there was something about this video in time. And my guest that I was actually interviewing today, Ariel Astoria, she put it so well, I thought. She said, you know what, we were almost like, because of COVID-19, being at home, being distanced, all of these sorts of things, we almost had like our eyes and ears opened to listening in a whole different way. And I thought that was a really good summary and perspective on why now. I searched up the Black Lives Matter hashtag to get some history on it. And, in 2014, it was used about 150,000 times on Twitter. Within the past few weeks, it's now up to over 8 million times. And I'm sure it's up since the last time that I checked, but that's people of all skin colors coming forward and saying and recognizing the importance of saying why Black lives matter, and that they do matter, and just the importance of having that conversation. And I just think that that's so powerful. Like, I truly believe that we are in the middle of a civil rights movement that people are going to look back on in textbooks to see like how the world came together to solve an issue that has been affecting us all for a long time, for centuries, and it has never been okay. But perhaps like we are now the generation to like change this completely and make sure that racial equality is a very real reality and focus and priority for all of us.
It's a profound time, and it's a time where we really need to be self-aware of how we've seen things, our education, understanding our peers, where they come from, what they've gone through, and really having a mind shift and a new perspective to a new beginning. So it's been really, really eye-opening, not only like personally educating myself and learning more about it, but also as a business leader, as a community leader, what are the changes that we're making in our day-to-day actions to be able to influence and to be able to encourage, empower, and everybody to have the same opportunity. So that's something that Natalie and I have really been aware of. We've been having a lot of conversations about recently as to how can we implement more of that inclusivity within the space that we're in.
Yes, so important.
Yeah, both of you beautifully said. I think that, it's really, 2020 is such a changing time, and we can only look at it as a positive because so many amazing things can come out of this, So it's like, I know for even myself, I really had to just take a look in the mirror and be like, how can I be more inclusive? Because when they talk about white privilege, I never really understood that. I always thought, well, like, let's just not be racist. Let's just stop being racist. Why can't we just stop being racist? We could just be inclusive of everybody. But I didn't look at my life and the way that I've lived my life and the things that I've had a privilege in my life just because I'm white. I've never really reflected on that until this moment. And I'm sure there are so many people who are doing the same. And I think that's what's so huge about this movement.
And that's how the world's changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's individuals looking in the mirror and each of us, asking ourselves, how can I do better?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's how we're going to truly make a difference.
Yeah. So have you personally implemented any things right now in your business and, in your movement to try to be more inclusive that you can share with us?
Yeah, I think, it's something that I've been aware of and thinking about throughout the beginning of Girl Talk Empowerment, because we bring girls together and have speakers on a stage, and we really saw, especially in the first year, we want a speaker on the stage who speaks to absolutely every girl in some way. And we need role models and people who we see ourselves in. Representation matters. And all different backgrounds, experiences, skin colors, religions, like all of that is so important, so that every individual, in our case every girl who's watching, could see someone who looks like them on the stage. But there's always room to do better. There's always room to do more. And one of the things that we're doing, even with Together We Rise, our daily Instagram live show, is we're now actually going to take a moment and bring up some of our past episodes that featured Black inspiring women, and we're going to just spotlight them, and let's amplify their voices again. Let's put this forward into where we are. And so I'm building a female speakers bureau and representing women from all different backgrounds. And again, what's top of mind for me? I want to have a roster that is representative of the world. And so people can find the speakers who make sense. You'll never be able to say again, we couldn't find a female, in the finance world to speak, who also happens to be perhaps a visible minority. You'll never be able to say that, because we're building the roster to show you that there are these inspiring women out there doing the work, and we make it easily accessible for people to find them.
That's amazing. Incredible. I'm so happy to hear that. And it's like, I knew that already just by following you, that that's very important to you. But, seeing that now that you're going to be putting even more of that to action and making that a possibility is just inspiring. And I love that you're doing that. Katie, I feel like we could talk for hours, because you're just like a wealth of wisdom, and like, it's been so amazing talking to you. But we're coming to the end of this podcast, and we like to ask, the very last question we ask all of our guests is, if you could leave us with one last wisdom bomb, what would it be?
Oh my goodness.
No pressure. It's like the hardest question.
I think one thing that if any of the stories that I've spoken about today have stuck, I think the theme that kind of flows through everything is to decide for yourself and for your life that you are worthy, capable, and deserve to live a great life, and deserve to have a life of your dreams and to build that. And I think that that's so important to kind of come to that realization for yourself. And as I started out with in today's chat, you are going to have people who doubt you along the way. You are going to have major setbacks and obstacles. We're human. Suffering, loss, pain, hardships are part of the human experience. Nobody gets out unscathed. It's part of what unites us and brings us together, actually, when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable and to share those experiences, because we all have something that has brought us down from time to time. So I think just building in yourself that inner resilience, believing that you are worthy, believing that you have the ability to make a difference. And sometimes we don't always know how we're going to impact the world, or how we're going to be shaking it up, or how we're going to, leave our mark behind. But I think that if you take that mindset of, I am going to look for problems in my circle, in my sphere of influence, that I could solve, take responsibility for them, and try to come up with a solution. If you look for ways to do that, every single day in every aspect of your life. I just believe that that is what we are called to do, and it actually leads you to where you're meant to be. I did not set out to do the things that I'm doing, to have a speakers bureau. Never would have imagined, thought that. Marketing company, never would. Like, I had different ideas about like what I'd be doing. So don't get caught up in like the specifics, like I need to be doing this at exactly this stage and exactly this way. Focus on, what value do I have to offer? What is my skill set? And with the problems that I see around me, how can I solve them? And if you do that, I promise you it leads to a very fulfilling and purpose-filled life.
And Katie, not in case, our listeners are going to want to know where they can find you, where they can reach you. So tell us where they can find you.
Absolutely. So katiezeppieri.com is a great place. Try and spell my last name. Just even Katie Zepp, and it'll take you part way there. My Instagram page is another great place as well, and that'll kind of feed you into all of the different directions.
Thank you.
Okay, see you guys.
Bye. So nice talking to you.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Course Creation Podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being a champion of ours. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit subscribe and take a quick second to review the podcast. We really want to hear from you. And we're going to be digging through reviews for our next guest. So if you're interested in being a guest, then you know what to do. Also, join our private Facebook community called the Course Creation Crew to connect with other course creators. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at the Course Creation Podcast. That is all. We appreciate you all so much and look forward to seeing you here next time.